Hey, hey! We are going to be reading a different story about space today. We are going to be reading from the book Brazen, Rebel Ladies Who Rocked the World. I love this book. But do know if you see this book out in the world, there are a lot of stories in it that are not appropriate for elementary school aged kids. So there's some in this book that are totally appropriate. There are others that are giving real histories of things that are just a little bit more adult themed than what's appropriate for elementary schoolers. But today, we are going to be reading about Dr. Mae Jemison, who is the first Black woman in space. So here we go. We're going to get to it in 3, 2, 1. Brazen, Rebel Ladies Who Rock the World by Penelope Baguio, I think. I'm not sure. Should have looked that up. And I'm going to show you the table of contents. So it shows us all of these different people who are in this book. Today we are going to be learning about Mae Jemison, astronaut. So that means we're going to turn to page 273. I've already put a sticky note on her page. Mae Jemison, astronaut. Let me see, I'm going to zoom in a teeny bit and refocus. So this shows us that Mae was born in 1956, and since there's no number here, at least at the time that this book was created, she had not died yet, and I believe that she's still alive now too. I'm pretty sure that, I'm gonna look it up. Yep, she is 64 years old. And this is a real picture of her. And look, that's the same picture that they used right there. Mae Carol Jemison is born on October 17th, 1956 in Alabama. Her nickname is Rosebud because of her pretty lips. She's afraid of the dark, of heights, of the basement, of everything. But as the youngest sibling, she has to learn how to be cunning and nimble to survive. And that means smart and fast to survive. In kindergarten, she states she wants to become scientific. And then her teacher's like, "You mean a nurse?" And she says, "No, scientific, like a mad scientist." Her family moves to one of Chicago's rougher neighborhoods where gang wars are raging. At home, when we hear gunshots, we turn off the lights and get down on the floor. So as a little girl, that's something that was normal where she lived. And in some places in the United States and in some places in the world, that is still a thing that is normal. Her mother protects her like a mama bear to keep them on the straight and narrow. And I covered that picture because this book is not necessarily made for kids. So the picture that's there, it's nothing too bad. It's just not school appropriate. So I put a little sticky note over it. Eventually, they move to a neighborhood where she's the only Black girl. And this is like, I so identify with this experience where people would be like touching my hair, pulling my curls just because they thought that they could because it was different than their hair. And you can tell by the look on her face, she's not into it. Mae is always asking her mom, who has better things to do, a million questions. The answer is always, figure it out, look it up. As a teen, she had two great passions in life. "Mom, I want to take dance lessons!" And Soul Train was a super popular show. It featured a lot of Black dancers that would be dancing to the modern songs of the time. And this was back in a time where like TV was still pretty new. So we might be used to seeing things like music videos on television, but this was before that was really a thing. So this was a program you could tune into and you'd be able to hear all of your favorite songs and also watch people dance to the music. She's like, "Mom, I want to take dance lessons." And then here's a different picture on her TV that says Star Trek. And if you don't know Star Trek is a show that has been on for forever. And it's about space travel in the future. Space, the final frontier. And I want a telescope too! Her parents don't have the means to buy her one, and that means they don't have enough money to buy her one. So Mae practically camps out in the planetarium, and a planetarium is a place, we actually have one in the Science Center in Seattle. I don't know if it's open if you just go to the Science Center, if you can go, I think you can go into the planetarium, but it's usually a place that's dark and you can look up at the ceiling and they project like different stars or show you models of the universe, galaxy, or our solar system. When she looks up into space, her fears of the dark and heights vanish. During that same period, she becomes a hardcore science fiction and comics fan. I'd say I'm a cross between Catwoman and Spock. But in the novels she reads, the interesting characters are never girls and never black. And she's saying, let alone black girls. So that means if there are hardly ever any there are never any girls, and they're never black, then that means that they're definitely never black girls. Maybe a black man every now and then, but not a black girl. And even so, probably not a black man. At the dinner table, her family talks about politics, civil rights, Stokely Carmichael, and Malcolm X. Don't say you're colored anymore, Mae. You're black. And she's wearing a shirt that says Miss Marvel. Her mother teaches her that they are beautiful just as they are. And going forward, they'll wear their natural hair with pride. But her father also teaches her that to excel, that her duty is to excel. So the thing that she's supposed to do in life is to succeed, is to actually do the things that she kind of dreams of doing. As a black girl, you're going to have to be twice as good as a white man to get where you want to go. Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated. Riots break out in Mae's neighborhood. Policemen are allowed to shoot to kill if necessary. A 13-year-old boy is gunned down in the street. Dark, but real history. Try and make this... Actually, never mind. Mae realizes her life isn't worth a thing. Even though she's smart and funny and pretty, she could be put down like a dog. And she's scared. But after a few days of hiding out, she starts to boil with rage. I come from women and slaves. My ancestors had no rights, but I am part of this country. I matter. In high school, Mae is a gifted athlete. She's also very, very good at science. Her curiosity is insatiable, which means that no matter what you do, she's always going to keep being curious. No matter how many books she reads, she's just going to be even more curious about something else. For her science project, she focuses on a genetic disease that affects a lot of African Americans, sickle cell anemia. Her mother helps her in the usual way. Figure it out. Look it up. She boldly calls up Cook County Hospital with her questions. It would be easier if you just stopped by our lab. Say tomorrow at 3? She's like, I was just calling to ask a couple of questions. I was not trying to come to the lab. There, she is received by lab directors who tell her she can stay and observe as long as she wants, but who refuse to give her any answers. What is your theory, Mae? So she does her research. To understand some articles, she has to read others, then others, and so on and so forth. She works non-stop, and I definitely remember that in undergrad and in grad school, where sometimes I'd be reading a research article and I wanted to know like how they got the data that they based the research off of, and so you have to go into the back of the article and see the articles that they cited, and then you have to go and read that article, and that article might lead you to another article, and it can go on and on and on, and that's exactly what's happening to Mae. She's only 15, but the researchers treat her like an adult. She wins first prize in Chicago's science contest. Her math teacher agrees to give her extra lessons after class, and this girl is like, seriously? Because it wasn't necessarily the coolest thing to be super smart. So she's like, seriously? And Mae's like, laugh all you want. After graduation, several prestigious universities tried to get her to enroll, and prestigious means that they're really like important, or people care a lot about those universities, or they're hard to get into. So a lot of those universities that people are like I don't even, it's a whole classist problem to begin with, that some universities are better than others. So like, I'm not even going to get into that. It's just that like some of the top universities in the school were offering, or in the country were offering her free scholarships to be able to go to school. Stanford is a no-brainer, and that's one of the schools that offered her a scholarship. Stanford is a no-brainer. And her mom's like, why so far away, honey, boo-hoo? Taking off for California all by herself at 16 is terrifying. But she knows she's heading for her dream school in her dream state. California is the most progressive, alternative, and just plain cool place in the world. And that's, of course, her opinion. 4 years later, she graduates with a double major in chemical engineering and African American studies. She specializes in African dance, Swahili, sub-Saharan politics, and Russian. It could come in handy for space travel. It's very true. But she starts to realize that there are many obstacles due to the trifecta, and that means when there's three things that are working against you. The trifecta of being a girl, Black, and from a modest background, and that means that her family didn't have a lot of money. People always assume she must not be that bright, and that means not that smart. Look around. Do you see any others? No? Well, there you go. And so he's saying, like, there's no girls and there's no Black people. And there's definitely no Black girls. So look around. Do you see any others? No? Well, there you go. Bye. And so to convince herself she belongs there, she holds on to the one thing she never doubted. I know I'm smart. After Stanford, she goes to med school in New York, a very male-dominated program, so that means that almost all the people there were men. She's looked down upon on the East Coast even more than in California, so people think even less of her on the East Coast than in California. But her first night there, at a student poker game, she cleans out her classmates, and that means that she won all of their money. So, are the girls losing? No, the women are winning. And that shuts them up. She's working about 40 times harder than at Stanford. I'm finding out you can remain efficient after 36 hours with no sleep. And that means that, like, you can still function after 36 hours with no sleep. And 24 hours are in one day. So that's a day and a half with no sleep. Then she makes a childhood dream come true when she does her internship in Kenya. Africa, for real. It's not a concept. These are my roots. She trains at free clinics, speaks, finally, Swahili, has her hair done, eats tons of great food, travels alone to neighboring countries, go back to New York? And she has herself a little existential crisis. And that's like, she's thinking about, wait, do I ever have to leave? Am I going to stay? What does it mean to stay? What does it mean to leave? She offers her services to all the, and what this is it's nonprofit organizations. So different places that they're not doing things so that they can earn a bunch of money that they can have themselves. They're doing it for the public. So she offers her services to those places in Africa. Doctor, engineering, heck, I'll even babysitter. Who cares? Whatever you need. She ends up with the Peace Corps in Liberia and Sierra Leone. She treats the worst hemorrhaging viruses, and hemorrhaging means when you can't stop bleeding, without equipment or medicine. Mae feels a little lost. She knows that deep down, she doesn't want to practice medicine. What I really love is science, an unknown world, sort of like Mr. Spock, you know what I mean? She hasn't thought about her childhood dream in ages. I mean, why not? Because no other Black girls have done it before me? At the time, NASA is recruiting after decades of sending out the message white men only. They are looking to add more diversity to their ranks. Mae applies without much hope. 1 year later, she gets a response. Everything about your background, chemistry, humanitarian work, dance, everything is of interest to us. So with her cat under her arm, she moves to Houston, Texas. Her training is extremely physical, and this says NASA, so here she is working at NASA. Her training is extremely physical and features, among other things, survival training in hostile environments. But she has finally made it. The first thing Mae sees through the window of the STS-47 Space Lab, that's Chicago. And that's where she started her journey. That's where she was in the beginning of the story, was in Chicago, here. She thinks to herself that, strangely enough, she always knew she would end up there at some point. She is the first Black woman in space. After 6 years of missions, Mae leaves NASA. Back on Earth, she teaches classes in environmental studies. We must connect technology with social platforms to get everyone involved. She founds a science camp for kids ages 12 to 16, and founds means created. So she created her own science camp for kids ages 12 to 16. And one day, she shows up at a Star Trek convention, and here it tells us that she's speaking in Klingon, and Klingon is a made-up language that is in Star Trek, but some people really do know how to speak Klingon. I know somebody that does. So in Klingon, she's telling this person, no, I mean, it's funny because I really am an astronaut. And thanks to that encounter, Mae Jemison becomes the first person to travel into space and guest star in an episode of Star Trek. So here she is acting in Star Trek, which was the show that made her want a telescope once upon a time when she was very young. So she got to actually guest star in an episode of Star Trek. Very cool. And then here is our picture that is in the back of the little section. Each woman has her own art page, which I love about this book. So it says, the spectacular Dr. Jemison. She can do it. So that was our story about Dr. Mae Jemison. She's even right here on the cover. From our book Brazen. I do want to let you know that if you enjoyed this book and you were thinking about picking up a copy yourself, there are a lot of things in this book that are not school appropriate, that are not, and further than that, are not elementary school appropriate, that are talking about some things that are more adult themed. So if you want to read more stories in this book, maybe have an adult check it out and have them tell you which stories are appropriate for you to be able to read, or maybe read it with an adult. All right, I will catch you back here next time. See ya!